WildCast, brought to you by Wildcat Oil Tools in Midland, Texas. Today we're talking with David Haughton. And David's our director of training for our fishing school and among other things. And he's done an amazing job with that and had an amazing career in life. And I look forward to learning more about it. So thank you, David, for being a part of this.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
So let's just get started with where you're from, where you were born and raised.
All right. Well, originally I was born here in Kermit, Texas. My dad worked for Parker Drilling. He was one of the youngest, very young tool pushers for Parker back then. So, born in Kermit, we followed the Parker Drilling rig around in different states, all the way from New Mexico, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Florida, Mississippi. And then he ended up going to work for a company called Tri-State Oil Tools back in, I think, 1955. Got into the fishing business, and we moved to a town, Morgan City, Louisiana, and that's where I basically was raised, and have that little bit of Cajun accent come through.
Every once in a while you pick it up. Yeah, you hear it sneak in there every once in a while. It's hard to be around that accent for any length of time and not pick up on it some. I'm born and raised here in Midland, but I got a friend from Abbeville, Louisiana, named Todd Hebert. If I'm around him for any length of time, I'll start mimicking that accent a bit unintentionally. But yeah, you do have it come through every once in a while. So born and raised in Louisiana, or not born and raised, but raised basically in Louisiana. And when you were growing up, what did you want to be?
Really, I didn't have any ambitions to, nothing ever came to mind. I smoked at an early age, so when I was in high school, there was a deal there with trade school that you could go to trade school your junior year and senior year and get 2 credits. And back then, you could actually smoke in class.
In trade school class.
In trade school class. So that was like, okay, I'm going to go there.
So that was the selling point, right? I can smoke it here.
I took up electronics. So decided I'd be electronic engineer. Did that for my junior, my senior year. Went to a college in Ellisville, Mississippi, out of Laurel, Jones Junior College. Took the electronics course there. The bad part about that is when I did it my junior year, the instructor wanted us to repeat our senior year. And then I go to college, and it's like doing the first grade for the 3rd time in a row. So that was a little bit boring. And that is when I decided, nah, this isn't for me. So I got into went to work for Tri-State Oil Tools on December 24th, Christmas Eve. I should have known better when your opening day of work is on a holiday, but there was no
They saw you
stuff.
come there like, hey, man, we got a guy that's going to work Christmas, and somebody gets a day off.
So that's when I started in 1971 and December 24th there at a town called Houma, Louisiana, and went to work for them.
And so it's just, like you said, their title was Oil Tools. So I assume it's not tremendously different than what we were doing, maybe technology-wise a little different, but not much probably. But it was fishing and the other type of stuff as well. Is that your first introduction into fishing?
No, they were basically back then. They were the #1 fishing company. They were very well known. They even made a comment there the other day about Red Adair, John Wayne's movie. We did a movie with Red Adair, and they mentioned Tri-State. My dad became store manager there in Morgan City. He didn't run tools too many years. They made him manager. And I used to hang out at the shop, really 10 years, 11 years, all the way up to my teenage years. It was backed up to the swamp, so you could hunt rabbit and squirrel. Back then, there was no internet or Facebook or messaging, so all the tool hands would come into the shop and discuss fishing. And I guess that's a bad trait about fishing people. They get together, they discuss fishing jobs. So I sat in, listened to them. They did resumes, handwritten. You didn't have computers. So I was able to read the resumes, talk to them. This was actually before OSHA, so So you could run around and play in the shop, and there was no such thing as real safety rules. So they did develop. But I learned Tri-State had a color code on their tools, so they would put tape around their connections. So you had like red was a modified connection, green was regular, black could be 8 round. So you could identify, more I look back at it, it gave you a reference to identify your threads by just looking at knowing the color of the tape. So that's where I basically learned the tools. I could get out tools at an early age. I could get out packer retrieving jobs, washover jobs. I knew things about the cutters. It was just fun to hang around, but it never really dawned on me that I would do that and that would be my career.
So it was just something that you got to be around and you got to be with your dad, and that was there's a lot of enjoyment there, but never something you looked at and said, man, this might be for me.
No.
At that point.
Correct. Yeah, I was just there I would actually shoot the rabbits at night because I didn't have a dog or anything to go chase them. And then my dad he would play gin, him and a district manager and another guy. So they would start like Friday afternoon and finish up Sunday morning. So I had to run at the shop basically that whole time. And they were open 24/7.
Yeah.
So there was always somebody there.
So you get sort of indoctrinated without knowing it, yeah. And you learn a ton about fishing without realizing that you're actively learning a lot about fishing and how to read resumes and how to source the equipment for the job and all of those things. And one of the things you mentioned is pretty interesting. They were doing visual management before that was even a term, right? With the tape and all of that. Mm-hmm. And all of that is sort of permeated the industry now. Like that's just kind of how things are done in a lot of places. So then you go in, you're doing your trade school because they let you smoke in class. It's outstanding. And you realize electrical stuff's not for me. Now you're working for Tri-State. Is your dad still working for Tri-State at the time when you joined them?
Yes. He was still manager in Morgan City. And
you couldn't get him to hire you? You had to go to home?
No, I actually defaulted. I started out, and that was one of the things they treat, since I did grow up with all of the guys, my training was sort of overlooked in a way that they just sort of looked at me and said, well, you already know this stuff. But I started out as a truck driver, hotshot driver, became the clerk within 2 months. I was doing the paperwork and reading the resumes and making sure they marking the right tools. Then I was relief dispatcher. I worked from like 4 to midnight one day, and then 11 to 7 another day, and relieved and took calls. And then one day they came in there and told me that, asked me if I knew where Casper, Wyoming was. And I said, no. And they said, well, you better find out because that's where your check's at. So I had to get encyclopedias. We didn't have the internet. We couldn't Google it. So I had to find out what Casper was. And got a U-Haul and loaded up my gun cabinet, my motorcycle, because that's all I owned, and went to Casper, Wyoming. And
the essentials then.
Yeah. My daddy was actually, he was the area or region manager of all of the Rockies. At that time they had the one store, and then they opened one up in Rock Springs. That was I guess that was the first boom, really, that this was probably in the early 70s. Well, it was in the early 70s.
Okay, so now you've gone from Kermit to Louisiana, and now you're in Casper, Wyoming.
Yep.
So how long were you in Casper?
3.5 years. I became the warehouse manager when they moved me up to Casper. So I took care of the warehouse, getting the tools out, the supervisors. Worked there for 3 years with Tri-State, and I had a run-in with one of them. I was on the call all the time, and one manager decided that he didn't like the answering service, and he didn't like the way they were answering the phone, and he just kept, and it was me and the answering service were the only ones on the phone. So I finally told him one day that I'll go take care of the answering service. So I left and went to work for a NL Acme company. It was Acme Tools, but it's sold out to NL, National Lead. Went to work for them for 6 months and was up there actually elk hunting with their region manager at Turpin Meadows, just south of Yellowstone. And 43 inches of snow, and I said, no, this is enough.
You'd had enough of Wyoming.
I've had enough of this cold weather and this snow. I'm going back south. So I called up the manager there in Morgan City with Tri-State and asked him if he had a job. And he said, sure, come on. So
now you're back to Louisiana.
Moved back to Morgan City. And I met my wife. I just met my wife. We had just been probably married 8 or 9 months at that time.
Did you meet her there in Casper?
Yes, sir.
Was she anxious to get out too?
Yeah. She actually grew up. Her dad was a Baptist preacher, so she traveled more than the oil field. He did churches all over East Texas, West Texas. So she grew up mainly in East Texas, and they had moved to Brush, Colorado, and then she ended up in Casper, working at a Safeway, and that's what run into her. So.
And said, hey, I got a deal for you. Let's go to Louisiana.
She got all excited when I told her I was in the fishing business. She thought she'd be able to go, catch fish. But
she didn't quite understand.
No.
Yeah. It's funny. People that aren't in the industry, when you start talking about fishing, when I hear fishing, the first thing I think of is what we do, and then most other people think about catching fish, like actual fish. So now you're back in Morgan City. You're back with Tri-State, and what are you doing for them there?
For there, when I went in there, the manager asked me if I wanted to run tools. I was 24 years old, Gulf of Mexico. That was unheard of. They didn't. It was old tool pushers, old company man, old fishing hands. So 24 was a stretch, but I told him sure. So I went out there, and he would tell the people on the rig that, don't run him off when he gets off the helicopter, because, give him a chance. And
trust me, he's been looking at this stuff since he's a kid.
And it was rough. They fought me. I put up with it for like 5 years, and then I developed an attitude and said if the next person, questions me, I'd tell them just put me back on the boat or the helicopter, and I'll go back home. But again, on the training part, when I went out, they worked out a deal. We had a fishing job for Gulf Oil, and it was on an Odie Code Chief, a jackup. I'd never seen I'd been around land rigs and gone on them and helped put, make tools up and all, but never an offshore rig. So I went out there, and the goal was not to do the fishing job or train, but the goal was to run out the rig. So they had me out there learning the rig. I would actually relieve the driller. I'd actually make connections, run in the hole, trip pipe, learn about the pumping systems and all the ins and outs of the rig. And of course, after I was out there about a week and a half, the fishing tool hand, I look up there and he's on the helicopter going home. So I go, well, what happened to him? He said, well, he'd been out here a while, so the company man said, he let him go home. He said, you can handle it. So then I ended up having to do the fishing job. So, and that was basically the story of my life. They would, I would go in there and go out with a fishing hand, and I'd wake him up and say, okay, we're on bottom. Oh, well, if you have any problems, come get me. You can handle it. So wasn't a whole lot of training, because again, I did a lot of work with them, and they just took it for granted that, hey, he knows what he's doing, leave him alone.
But it seems like you did. Or you figured it out. Like, that's most things, right? You figured it out because you have to.
And that's why I was not a good person to send somebody out. We trained a lot there in Morgan City in the Gulf, but you didn't want to come train with me because it was like that. I didn't have time to sit there and explain to somebody what I was doing, because I really didn't know what I was doing.
Didn't know how to explain it anyway.
No, So I was still learning. But no, I was very successful. I feel like I was very successful. And
well, I would say so. I mean, and we'll get to it, but when people say, man, that guy wrote the book on it, you literally wrote 2 of them. So, but I do want to discuss that a little bit later. But so now you've gone out in the Gulf, done those things. How long are you with Tri-State all total?
Well, Tri-State Baker bought Tri-State in November 1972, but the president and the owners, there was 3 of them that owned Tri-State, signed a deal with Baker that Baker had no contact or anything for 15 years. So it was basically like under the rug. Our check said a subsidiary of Baker International, but nobody really knew Baker owned Tri-State. So it stayed Tri-State till '87, and that's where a lot of people reference Baker buying Tri-State, and we became Baker Service Tools.
But it actually happened back in '72.
Yes.
There was just a 15-year agreement that we still get to operate as though nothing happened. So really Baker's just buying the services and revenue and all of the stuff associated with it.
Correct. Yeah, when that day, when the 15 years was up, I come in off a job and probably had 20 envelopes with Baker stuff, rules and regulations and stuff like that. So that was in '87. During that time with Tri-State, I left them again. My daddy started a fishing company called National Fishing Tools there in Houma. They needed help, so I had, really, you're honored to your parents, so I left, went to work for them. They sold out to a company called Delta, and they didn't renew any of their agreements with the oil companies, so they basically didn't have any companies to work for. So I went back to work for Tri-State after I was gone another 6 months, come back to work for Tri-State. So all in all, it was 46 and a half years when I officially retired from what was Baker Oil Tools, Baker Hughes.
So at what point during all of that do you decide, man, I should write a book about this?
Well, that was actually Joe DeGear, who I was working for with Baker. Guff Publishing came to him, and there was a book written by Al Gore way back years before, and they wanted to take it and bring it into the upgraded and basically create like rules of thumbs on fishing jobs. So it was actually a second version of Al Gore's book.
Like the politician Al Gore?
No.
Yeah, okay, good. I was like, wait a minute now, this doesn't make sense to me.
Gore Kemp. It might not have been. I might have said Al Gore. I might have to edit that one.
We won't edit it, but I was just making sure. I'm like, wait a minute, I think
Al Gore,
you know what, the guy
Kemp,
that invented the internet? That's amazing.
But he was an old fishing tool company and gentleman that he wrote basically the first book, and then we took it and changed some of the stuff, upgraded it, because a lot of the stuff was not of like today. Some of the stuff we did back then is not done today, and things have changed. Technology's evolved, so some of that stuff it's put in the closet and the door's locked. So that's how I did. I did the fishing part. Joe was the leader, and he did the introductions and a few chapters in it, and then Mark McGirt did his name's on there. He did the through tubing part. So the 3 of us together wrote the book.
And so that's impressive. What did you learn through that process of writing a book? Like, just having never done it, you're like, okay, well, obviously I need to spell things correctly, and there's some sentence structure stuff I should probably pay attention to. But there's got to be more to it than that. So what did you, when you went into it, what's something that you were like, man, I didn't anticipate it being like that at all to write a book? No,
it wasn't really that bad. I had the reason I was there is in that part. It was 96. My wife had a daughter, and we had 17 years when I thought we were through having any kids. We had another one. So I never really run in tools offshore. I never got to see my 2 boys grow up, spend a lot of time with them. So here come my second chance. I got a little girl showed up. So that's when I went to Houston in the marketing group. So I was the applications specialist. support for worldwide global. So that gave me the opportunity to travel internationally, see the world, and to do the road shows, you know, the AADE and SPE, the conferences, and write articles for World Oil, the SPE journal, offshore, the digest. So I'd written some articles on tools, and so writing the book was not really too difficult.
You've already been accustomed to kind of writing that type of stuff anyway, just in shorter form.
And you had the publishing company who would do the edits and then send it back to you and make sure that everything was, you know, in the right order and correct. So it wasn't that bad.
Yeah, so you get that together, the book comes out, and you're still working for Baker at this time, or no?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting. What did Baker think about that? Did they have any opinion about it, or did they?
Well, they allowed us to do it since we were all three working for Baker.
Sure.
Baker allowed. They paid author awards every time you wrote a paper or did a paper or presentation at one of the conferences. You got paid, so they actually paid us double for the book.
Oh, nice.
And we were avid golfers back then, so we took our payment from Baker and flew to over there in South Carolina and played golf for a weekend.
You know what, man? I can think of a lot worse ways to do that. So then when you retired from Baker, when you retired, were you like, man, I'm good? Or you don't strike me as somebody that's just going to sit around.
Well, I didn't. I retired from Baker and jumped over and went to work for our KLX fishing. So I joined them and stayed with them. I was their product line manager, vice president over tech services for close to three and a half years, I believe. And then the COVID, hit everybody. And so that's when I probably fully retired, was when that came about.
Now you're not retired anymore.
No.
Now you work here at Wildcat.
Yeah.
We drug you back in.
Kalen called, Jim Adele called. I came over and discussed the job opportunity and thought it was great. Enjoyed the people. They seemed, good. So we worked out a deal.
And the deal was to build a fishing school. And it's something that probably has been done in other places before, but it is a bit unique that a company will say, man, let's build something internally to train our employees that we identify could become fishermen and train them in the right way. And you're instrumental in that. When you look at bringing people from where they are to becoming fishermen, what are some attributes you're looking for in those people?
They have to learn, and I tell them it's not so much as me teaching them. They have to be willing to learn it. It's not fishing it's not. They tried to get the black art out of it, but it is an art. It's more of an art than a science. There's not. I tell people that you can go out there and get books and videos and the best equipment on golf, and you still can't go out there and hit a golf ball. So it's the same way with fishing. You have to.
That is true.
You have to learn it, and you just have to have that mental capabilities to be able to a little bit think outside the box. You got to manipulate something that 2 miles on the ground that in a little bitty old hole that you can't see, and your job is to get it out. So that's one thing I look at. I've taught a lot of people through these schools, and they're all different. But that's the main thing, is for them to really want to do it.
They have to have an eagerness to learn the material and application. Yeah. So, and that's something I want to touch on. You were putting on schools I imagine as just David Haughton Industries or whatever, right? somewhat.
Well, it was with Baker. I mean, Baker had their
got
training schools, and we would do 2 or 3 of them a year. And I probably did, I don't know, 60 or 70 of them.
How many people do you think you've trained? If you had to just off the top of your head guess.
I don't know. If I said there was 20 and was 20 times 60, well, that would, you know.
But now you're asking me to do math on camera. That's ridiculous.
That's like 1,200 probably. So somewhere around 1,000, 1,200 people. And that's not counting the customer.
Sure.
You know, where you do the customer one day and lunch and learn. So, and it's a basic, and what we're doing, and what you've done is with the online part of it, and then we'll have the class part of it, which is more of an intermediate type deal, and then you have individual advanced classes, because some of the tools we run in our industry, you may only, a seasoned hand may only run them once in his whole career. So you have to touch on the more advanced tools. It's not run that much. So that's another aspect of it. And it's just ongoing. I had the privilege of doing R&D with Baker and working with engineering, some great engineers, some great designers. We were able to test, and I like to, I don't know how to put it, but if you tell me how to do something, I'll do it. But then I want to tweak it. So I want to see. I use one analogy is like a NASCAR, a race car. You don't know exactly how fast that car can make it around that track until you hit the wall. Then you know, okay, don't go there. So
it's called testing to failure.
I sort of ran tools like that, and I apologize to some of the customers that I might have went too far, but I had to learn what was the limits and how far you could take something. So in teaching and being able to express myself to them, fishing is also you got to success. I'll put it that way. Success is an irrelevant term, because getting a fish out of the hole, cleaning a well is successful, but doing it in one day versus a week versus 2 weeks, the result's the same. You're still successful, but are you successful? You're not efficient. So I try to teach that, and that's one of our main goals that we're going to do here at Wildcat is to try to improve the efficiency. And not try, but we will improve the efficiencies on how we do things, and because there is a better way to do things. But the fishing tool hands are probably the world's worst, because they learn it's a art, or it's a job that you learn. It's hand me down. You only know what you've been taught, and the person that taught you only knows what he's been taught. So it's almost like, okay, your granddaddy taught your daddy, and then your daddy taught you, and I'm going to come in there and tell you what they told you was wrong. Well, you're just going to want to fight me out there in the parking lot, because you don't want to believe that. So it's a struggle, but they do. Our technology in the fishing is lacking, I believe, in behind all other industries, because the tools that's been around, they've been around for 100 years, and they're still around. So. It's not a really technology-driven industry, which it should be.
A lot of, lack of a better term, like dumb metal out there, just doing what it does, right? And what you're describing, talk about success. A lot of times, people look at the job as, my job is to get that out of the hole. If they get out of the hole, they're successful. But like you said, if it should have taken you 2 days and you're out there for a month. Yeah, you cleaned out the hole there, but was that a win? Net positive, right? So when you look back over your career in fishing, and you said, a lot of the stuff hasn't evolved, what has changed in fishing that you can look back on and say, man, we did it back then, and now it's done this way? What's that change been? What's some things you think about that really stand out that have changed in the industry?
Not a whole lot, Justin. When you look back, the overshot's been around since the 1930s. Rope spears, we still fishing wireline with a tool that was originally back with cable tool rigs first come out. So other than the technologies in the wellbore departures area, casing exits, milling, the cutting technology, that type of that's one of the major changes. We went from a carbide now to where you have these inserts and you're able to machine iron versus grinding it. So you're cutting, milling techniques, and then again the casing exit type, and some of the deep water industry has evolved more. I actually have some patent on some of that stuff, but it's cut and pull systems out there in the deep water, and fishing some of these elaborate completions they have out in the Gulf it's caused us to develop new tools, and not so much new technique, but at least some kind of new tools.
When you look on the industry and you say, it's got to evolve, there are things that can be done better. Where are some areas that you see opportunities for the industry, fishing industry specifically, to evolve or to improve in terms of technology maybe, or even just in general improve?
Well, I mean, the tools can get better. The what we're running into is now I used to always get calls from companies wanting to make things a certain OD, and they would ask if we could fish them. It seems like nowadays they're sticking stuff in wells that they're not asking anybody if we can get them out once we stick them in there. So it's somewhere along that communication between the fishing companies and oil companies, there's a miscommunication in there some kind of way, because it makes it more difficult. They're having to spend more money, and we just don't have the tools to be able to fish these things. So I would like to see a collaboration more, and between the two before, in the well design or the well completion stage of it. I think would help companies and us.
It seems like that would be like a top 10 question. Like, if I put this in there and something goes wrong, can I get it back? That seems like that would be a no-brainer to ask. And you're saying is that something that's kind of always been the case? I mean, you mentioned that before you were accustomed to getting asked, can we fish it? And now you're saying that is less so the case.
Correct.
When did you see that change, and what do you think made that change?
Technology. The one of them was in the Gulf when their sand control, for whatever reason, they didn't believe they were getting sand around their gravel packs, so they developed a system called a shunt screen, which basically added another little piece of pipe on the side of the gravel pack setting, which was larger pipe. So it ended up completely filling the idea of the hole up. And we told them that they couldn't fish it. And then they make it out of Inconel, which we didn't have the technology to even mill up Inconel. So they made it even more difficult. And they said, well, we're not
worth doing, it's worth overdoing. Yeah.
So they say, well, we're not going to worry about it because we're not going to fish it. And then shortly after they ran one, they decided, well, we got to fish it. Well, what happened to you? Said you didn't want to fish it.
I think it's funny you said they decided they needed to fish it. They were presented with an opportunity to fish it, I would imagine.
And here in West Texas, especially for the efficiencies of the downhole ESPs, the motors, they're running big motors in 5.5, 23 pound. That there's just no. You can't make a wash pipe can't be a bigger OD than it is ID. It just not it does not work. So they're fishable from a standpoint of you're just going to be able to have to grab the top of it, the little flange. But as far as the motor itself, it's just it's too big to be in there to start with. So a couple little bitty pieces of sand or debris or scale, it's going to stick it. So there's a lot of that. which is my main business is, and everybody's out here fishing ESPs.
What do you think it's going to take to move that, or to innovate those types of things, and create an environment where those questions are starting to being asked again?
Somebody's going to have to step up, and I try to. I keep teaching it when I teach the customers. It mentioned it to, maybe we can get the motor people and pump people to communicate with us to see if there's something that we could help them with to be able to make these things a little bit more fishable. As far as their business, making them stronger and smaller, I can't answer that because I'm not a downhole motor guy, but they need to look at like cable. Everybody out here fishes cable. Is there anything you can do to make the cable stronger or millable, or there's something? The problems that we're having and we're facing is like anything. When you have a problem, you should be analyzing it and looking into a solution, and not just taking it for granted and going on, walking away.
Not just saying that's just chalk it up to the game. That's just the way it goes.
Okay.
Yeah, trying to figure out if we can actually solve that problem.
And that's something we're doing with the fishing. Kalen, our vice president of fishing, and Jim and Medell and Red Kennedy, we're analyzing the jobs, doing post job analysis, trying to figure out, and talking to the hands, what are we doing, how are we doing it, and where can we do it better? Not just call it status quo. And that's one of my pet peeves, is when you ask a fishing hand why he's doing something, and he looks at you and says, well, I've always done it that way. That's telling me he doesn't have a clue.
Yeah, I've always asked, it being a lifetime industry and safety, whenever someone said that to me, well, this is the way we've always done it, I would always ask them, well, what if that was wrong? What if you've always done it wrong and you just kind of got away with it? Or wrong is maybe a bit of a black or white term, but what if there's a better way to do it? And you're not open to looking at that for whatever reason. I think you're saying the same thing with fishing. A lot of times, like you said, these guys come to you and their dad's dad taught their dad, and their dad taught them, and now if you say, hey man, maybe there's a different way to tackle that, now you're challenging their granddad. What are you doing?
Oh, you're exactly right. That's exactly what's happening. They don't want to admit that maybe there is a better way, and that's the difficulty. And it's not only the people running the tools; it's the people you're running the tools for. They've done it that way. They've been successful. They've run tools. I had companies come out there and run tools, specific tools that are just not necessarily correct.
But maybe they got away with it.
Yes.
And so they just my wife accuses me a lot of times of going the long way when I'm driving somewhere. And what I tell her is, well, I know that way gets me there. and rather than try a new way that might be more efficient, I'm reluctant. So I think that's just a natural tendency of anyone. And breaking through that's a real challenge. But you're right. Anytime you're going to create any sort of innovation in an industry or in technology or anything, it takes a few people to just say, hey, let's examine my priors and make sure that those are in line, or there can't be an improvement on them. As we move forward, you're relatively new to Wildcat. You joined the team this year, specifically when we wanted to build out our school and those types of things. And we thought it was very important from a credibility standpoint to get someone like yourself that has a tremendous amount of credibility in the industry, and specifically in fishing. What are your thoughts about Wildcat and where we're headed with the fishing program and the school, but more generally speaking, just overall as a company? What are your thoughts on how Wildcat's approaching this as a solution?
Well, I think it's great, and I think the people, the team we have, and the action items that we're taking, we've already discussed some new, not so much as new tools, but you could consider them new tools, but more or less new techniques, new ways to do what we've always been doing, but maybe tweaking it to a point to where we can be more efficient, more reliable, more consistent. That's something our industry doesn't really have. There's not and we've talked about that. There's not a consistency of where you go out and run the same thing and get the same results. That's just the nature of our business. They don't like our industry doesn't like change. You mentioned that. So that's something to overcome. But here at Wildcat, with Tripp and Don, they embrace change. They're not backing up from it. They're accepting it. So I see a bright future and success.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. And that is that's something that Wildcat has a lot of, and that's just a willingness to embrace new ideas, new concepts. Doesn't mean we're going to do them, every one of them, but it does mean that they're willing to entertain that conversation. And I love the way you put it. You know, they're not backing up from it. In fact, in a lot of ways, they're initiating that change, and that's refreshing. And I think that's what's going to ultimately move the industry forward and sets Wildcat apart from a lot of our competitors.
Yeah. Yes, you, and hopefully, we're not. Hopefully, we will. You know, we'll walk the walk and talk the talk. We'll do what we say we can do, and that's all you can do.
Make the next generation of fishermen.
Yes.
So, well, David, I've learned a lot just sitting here with you. Like I said, you came on the team relatively short time ago, and I've gotten to spend some time with you, but not a good amount, and I've just been kind of curious what your background is, and so it's great to sit and chat with you and really kind of learn more about you. But what's next for David? You're gonna do this for the next till you don't want to, or?
Well, that was our agreement. With you know, if Wildcat got tired of me, so be it. If I got tired of Wildcat, so be it. But hopefully, I'm old, but I'm not that old. So hopefully I got a few more years left in me, and we'll take each day as it comes.
Well, we'll take every one of them that we can. So I really appreciate you being a part of it, and the school that we've built is amazing, and obviously you've spearheaded that, and
thank you.
And I'm excited to see, look back in a few years and say, man, this is where we started, and look where we are, and I think we'll be revolutionizing an industry. So.
Well, glad to be here, and hopefully we'll benefit, and the hands will benefit, and we'll have a win-win situation.
I know we will. But thank you so much for your time today, David.
Thank you.
All right.